What I thought I'd do right now is just bring up a fellow in an organization that I discovered randomly about a year ago, and I'm amazingly impressed with it. And it reminded me, Michael Hirschman, our board member, who's over there, was kind enough to get Walter to speak. We'll appreciate this when, Jackie Robbins said the measure of a man is the impact that he has had on others. So Scott Harrison's a young guy, but I think you'll be impressed with the impact that he's had on others, and I hope you'll be inspired for this. And if you're not, it's not my fault. But anyway, Scott, come on up. So,
thank you. Well, congratulations, everyone. I realize I'm standing in between whatever's next, whether it's cocktails or some families and young kids or a lot of dogs at our table that are like hungry and waiting to be fed. So I will do my best to make this interesting and challenging and inspiring. Tim gave me the opportunity to share a little bit about my personal story, to talk about water, and then to talk about charity water and some of the things that we've done. And it's amazing. I feel like even before I've begun, I'm preaching to the choir. It's so rare that I get to talk to a group with some of the values that we care so deeply about. I know are personified at these different tables and at these companies. So congrats to you guys, and I'm really excited to give this talk. So I'll talk a little bit about my backstory. I was born in Philadelphia. All right, we got Philly in the house. Very conservative Christian family. My mom became an invalid when I was 4. I was an only child, so I grew up kind of in a caregiver role, very active in my church, playing by the rules, playing in the church band, until the age of 18. When, like so many cliches, and I hate that this part of my life is a cliche, I rebel. I grow my hair down to my shoulders. I join a rock band. I move to New York City, and I am going to now look out for number 1. Sick of playing by the rules. I am in search of fame and fortune in the city. So my band immediately breaks up, but we hated each other. We were great, but we hated each other. And I learned that you could rebel in style here in New York City. There was a job where you get paid to drink alcohol. It was called a nightclub promoter. So to the chagrin of my parents, the next 10 years flashed by. And magically, their son is now 28 years old. In some VIP club, I have picked up every single vice that you can imagine. I smoked 2 packs a day for 10 years. I have a cocaine problem, a gambling problem, a drinking problem, a pornography problem, a strip club problem. You name it, and I've got it at this point. And my life on the outside looked amazing. I'm jumping in the back of limousines with models. I'm flying around to Fashion Week. I was getting paid $2,000 a month by Bacardi just to drink Bacardi in public. Budweiser paid us another $2,000 just to drink Bud in public. So we thought we were living these fantastic lives. Thankfully, 10 years later, I came to my senses. I was in Punta del Este in Uruguay with the jet set and all these beautiful people, and I had the BMW and the Rolex and the grand piano in my apartment and the girlfriend that was on billboards and the Labrador Retriever for the dog lovers at my table. And I thought, I should be fantastically happy. And I realized I was the worst person I knew. I was a sycophant. I was emotionally bankrupt. I was spiritually bankrupt. I was morally bankrupt. And I realized that the legacy I was leaving was just I would literally have gotten millions of people drunk by the time I was dead. And my tombstone would read, like, here lies the club promoter who just got people drunk for a living. So I had a return to a very lost faith as a kid, but I wanted to try to live that out without hypocrisy. So I sell all of my possessions a couple months later, and I start applying to the famous humanitarian organizations in the world. Mr. Nightclub Promoter, after 10 years of debauchery, is now ready for humanitarian service. Well, maybe this doesn't surprise you guys, but I am denied by every single organization who's like, stay away from our work. We're important people doing important things. Finally, one organization says, if I pay them $500 a month, I could volunteer. I couldn't make this up. So I said, all right, great. Here's my credit card details. I'll give a year of service. Where are you guys going? And they said, we're going to a country called Liberia. People don't believe me. I had never heard of Liberia. This is way before Ebola. The story then was of a 14-year civil war in Charles Taylor who had destroyed the country with child soldiers. So I joined this humanitarian mission of doctors and surgeons. I dust off a photojournalism degree from NYU and say, I've got 15,000 people on my club list. I can tell them stories, a different story. The stories of the great humanitarian work that this organization would be doing. So my life changes. I go in with 14,000 UN peacekeeping troops, which was the largest force ever deployed in the world at that time. And I live on this giant hospital ship for about a year. 41 countries sent their best doctors. And instead of taking their families to the Bahamas, they served for free, operating on those without access to medical care. Liberia was a disaster. There was no electricity in the country. There was no running water in the country. There was no sewage. There was no mail. You could not send a letter to anyone in the country. People were living in bombed out apartment buildings like this, houses that were once beautiful and it completely ruined. So we would rent out football stadiums, soccer stadiums. Well, the government would donate them, and we would do a screening for patients, and we'd say, if you need access to medical care, turn up and our doctors will try and help you. And my third day on the mission, 7,000 people were lined up outside the stadium for 1,500 surgery slots. I remember just breaking down, weeping, understanding that over 5,000 people were going to have to go home, people that had come with hope. Something kind of snapped in me that day, and I've never gone back. I did a lot in the year in Liberia. I could spend time talking about these amazing doctors and some of the patients. But the main thing that I brought back with me was I learned that people were drinking dirty water. And I would go into the villages, and I would see teenage girls like this, Howard, drinking from swamps, from ponds, from rivers. Now, the water crisis to me and my friends was that we would sell $10 bottles of Voss water at our clubs, $10 bottles of Pellegrino. And here, over half the country was drinking bad water. So no wonder people were sick. So I came home to New York after 2 years of service. I extended the year to a second with the idea for charity water. How could we live in a world where so many people didn't have access to clean water? And instead of going and working on new hospital ships and recruiting new doctors, I wanted to kind of get to the question behind the question of so much of the disease that I was seeing and help people get clean water. So I'll talk a little bit about the water crisis. I don't respond well to statistics, so you're not going to hear a lot about that from me, but this is the top line number. Right now, as we sit here and drink our wine and drink our clean water, 750 million people, because of where they're born, are not drinking clean water. They are drinking dirty water. Today, 4,500 kids will die because they didn't have clean water to drink. They're simply dying of diarrhea, dehydration. So we've tried to kind of humanize this and go out and meet the people over the last 8 years and tell their stories. So if you are trapped in the water crisis, you might look like John Bosco in Rwanda. This is the only water he has known his entire life. Walks out of his hut into the village, takes this water home to his entire family. If you guys traveled with me, you would see kids and cows sharing little muddy puddles like this. You would learn about all the different diseases associated with bad water. Some you've heard of, like cholera, obviously, E. coli. Some maybe you have not heard of, like schistosomiasis, which is a fancy word for parasites or for worms. This child in Kenya, I photographed, she was drinking water from a river, and every time she would drink, she would throw up in her shirt. And we sat and we watched in horror for a couple cycles of this, and then we took the water away and promised to try to go and find a solution for that village. But I wanted to know what was actually inside the water that was making her sick. So I brought it home and I gave it to this bottle to Rockefeller University, and I said, would you guys throw this under a microscope and make me a video? And they did. I remember they were saying, they're like, hey, we're not experts on all the different kind of amoeba and parasites, but that water you sent us is alive. No kid should be drinking water that is alive. Leeches, something that I had never in my entire adult life associated with drinking water, but yet community after community that were getting their water from open springs would say that leeches were their biggest problems. They would say the big leeches we can always filter out. We pour the water through cloth, through dresses, through scarves, but sometimes the little leeches will get through our filtration, grow up inside our children, and the leech likes to crawl up to the back of the throat. You hear this the first few times and you're like, oh, that's just a story. You hear it 50 times and you know that it's true and it's a real problem. Parents, 2 ways that you get a leech from the back of your kid's throat. One is using a stick and you pry the leech off and you try to actually kill the leech or it just crawls back up. Or you'll give your kid a little bit of diesel fuel. to scald the leech, and hopefully not enough to actually injure your child. I was passionate about education. I learned that about half of the world's schools didn't have clean water or toilets. How good could your education be if, like these kids in Ethiopia, you have to bring river water, dirty river water, in your little jerry can to school? And if you're a teenage girl and you get your period, you stay home from school those few days a month because there is no toilet, there is no water. One of the largest impediments globally to girls' education, and if you drop out of school, then you spend the rest of your teenage years just walking for water, 40 pounds on your back. Breaks our heart to see 20, 25-year-old girls completely hunched over, even if they're carrying nothing, from the years of damaging their spine, not even carrying clean water on their backs. Probably the most wrecking story for me over the last 8 years was this woman named Leta Kiros. I've been to Ethiopia 23 times since starting Charity Water. It's a country that I deeply love. And on one of the visits, I learned about this woman who was walking 8 hours a day for bad water. And she had a clay pot. And one day she walks back into her village and she slips and falls and she breaks her pot and all of her water spills out. And instead of going back to get more water, she hangs herself from a tree in the middle of her village. So I'd heard this with a couple donors on a trip, and I didn't believe it at first. Through our local partners, I wound up verifying that this woman's name was Leta Kiros, and she'd lived about 10 years ago. And last year, I got a pass from my wife, and I said, I want to go and live in her village. I want to walk in her footsteps. I really want to see the tree. I need to reconnect with our work and just humanize it again. So I went and visited where Leta Kiros lived. I had to rent a donkey, put my solar backpack on it, hiked 9 hours over the mountain, got to the chief's house, pitched my tent. And I met Leta Kiros' mom, and her mom recalled exactly how she felt when they brought her daughter to her, covered in a shroud. And she said she began convulsing. She threw herself against her stone house. She injured her back, and she was never the same again. She said her best friend that worked with her that day is still alive. Sent me to see her later that day, and I met her. Her name was Yeshreg. And she said, these were the clay pots that we used to carry. They were 10 pounds just empty. Now they've been replaced with the lighter yellow jerry can. She says, you want to see where we got water? We still get water there today. So she takes me to the top of the plateau where this village is and said, well, it's at the bottom. We get all the way to the bottom, and there's a long line of jerry cans. And the source that Leta Kiros and the women are still using today is just this nasty little spring. And the yield is so low that you have to wait hours once you actually do descend this treacherous decline. Talked with the women there. Some of them knew her. And then they took me up and they said, this is the tree. This is where we found her body. I didn't know this until I went and lived there for a week. She was 13 years old. She was a girl. And I asked her best friend, I said, why do you think she killed herself? Why didn't she just go back for more water? She said, my friend was this incredible visionary. She would talk about getting out of the village. She would talk about bringing education and changing everything here. And she was a responsible girl. She said she killed herself because she wouldn't have wanted to let her mother down. Her mother needed that water to cook dinner for the family. And the shame would have been too much for her for being clumsy and spilling the water. And for me, it was such a powerful way to realize that this issue, it's not about statistics. It's not about 750 million people. It's about people like Leta Kiros, people with names, with faces, with hopes, with dreams, many who are in despair simply because of where they're born into a system without their most basic needs met. So it's a solvable problem, and what I loved about this was we actually know how to bring clean drinking water to every single person in the world. It is not a mystery. The secret is not in a lab, in a petri dish. And if you're solution agnostic, you can provide 100% water coverage. So we funded a bunch of stuff, from hand-dug wells to rainwater systems to biosand filters to UV carbon, ultrafiltration, springs, lots of different solutions to bring water to these rural villages. I'll just talk about one because it's a lot of fun, and it's not so different than what you would do if you bought a house upstate New York. You would drill a well in your backyard and you'd hook up your nuclear family. Well, that's what we're able to do for hundreds of people. What the communities don't have is about $1 million of drilling rigs and equipment and compressors and trucks. What they do have is the local labor and the skilled labor. So a team of 8 will drill for about 3 days, and it is one of the most amazing things to see in a community that has never had clean water. The horrible irony, they have been living on top of the clean water that could have saved the lives of their children, given their women so much time back over the years. And it is just one of the most extraordinary moments to witness. I've done this 50 or 60 times now, and it just never gets old. The dancing, the clapping. Sometimes the party will go on for a day. Something as simple as $10,000 to change the course of hundreds of lives. We say at Charity Water that water changes everything. We believe so much in the powerful, transformative effect of water. Obviously, if kids are drinking clean water and water without leaches, they are healthier. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that. If kids have clean water at their school, if they have toilets at their school, they get better educations. The main beneficiaries are really women. Throughout the developing world, it's the job of the women and the girls to get the water. And the women will tell us amazing stories of what they have done with the time, the reclaimed time. Some of them start small businesses and earn an extra $1 or $2 a day selling rice at the market, selling peanuts. Some women just say, we're better moms. We're able to spend more time with our children. What I loved about the issue was it was one of the few things I thought everybody on earth could agree on. Regardless of your religion, of your politics, of your geography, right? Everybody could stand for clean water. No one in this room wants that kid to down the water on the left. No one. And we know how to solve this problem. So why wasn't there a movement? Why weren't more people talking about it? Why weren't more people doing anything about it? Why weren't they being generous? Why didn't they care? So I thought we could do something about that. I had told the wrong story for 10 years. The story that if you got past my velvet rope and you bought $500 bottles of Cristal, your life had meaning. But what if I could tell a very different story about redemption and compassion and empathy and move people towards generosity to care for others? My favorite story, if there is the opposite end of the spectrum of a woman, a 13-year-old girl killing herself in despair, it's probably this woman, Helen. Helen got clean water in Uganda from one of our projects, and we asked her how her life was different now that she had clean water. And she said something that really made us think. She said, for the first time in my life, I feel beautiful. We didn't really understand. We're like, well, of course, you're a beautiful woman. What do you mean? She said, well, you don't understand. Before, I had to walk a long distance to get water, and I could only take 10 gallons a day for my whole family, my husband, my 2 kids. And she said, as the woman of the family, I always put my children and my husband first. And I had to make choices every day. Do I cook with the water? Do I clean? Do I wash my husband's clothes? Do I wash his body? Do I wash my kids? Do I wash their school uniforms? There was never enough. She said, now that there's clean water in my village, I have enough water for my face and my body and my clothes, and I feel beautiful. I thought, what an amazing thing, something that so many of us take for granted could restore dignity to someone just by, increasing the quantity of her water to a fraction of what we get to use every single day. I started the organization downtown in New York 8 years ago, and the mission was kind of simple, right? I wanted to help end the water crisis, to create a day where, my kids or grandkids could grow in a world where no guy like me comes and, crashes the end of a dinner with pictures of other kids drinking from swamps. But the vision I really had as I was 30 and I was talking to my friends was I wanted to reinvent charity. I wanted to reinvent giving. I realized that my friends were not giving. They were not giving to their parents' charities. They were not giving to their grandparents' charities. They didn't trust charities. The biggest problem they had was where the money went. And I would hear this phrase, the black hole. Charities are black holes. I don't know how much of my money will actually reach the people. CEOs making millions of dollars and hiring their cousins and nephews and nieces. Anderson Cooper, doesn't make this any easier for the sector, chases the bad charities for a week every year, and they slam the door in his face, and people say, that's why I don't give. Those crooks. And I thought, there was this huge disenchanted group of people. Certainly, the youth, the millennials, they needed a different model. They needed charities that they could believe in. So I thought you had to solve, from a business model approach, the problem with money. I thought, what if we could make a promise to give away 100% every single time of the public's money to directly fund water projects? Maybe you guys would have agreed at the time, but a lot of friends said this was the stupidest thing they had ever heard. How will you pay for overhead? How will you pay a salary someday for the people you need to hire? You're going to need an office. I'm like, I don't know, but this would be really cool if we could pull it off. And we're going to make life really difficult. We're going to pay back credit card fees. So if someone gives $1,000 and Amex takes 4%, we are going to make up that 4%. We're going to send every single penny to the field. So I opened up 2 bank accounts and said, somehow we're going to make overhead cool to a very small group of people, and we'll treat them like investors. I didn't know how that would work, but I thought if you could take the money objection off the table, we could get a lot of people who weren't giving to give. The second thing was just to use technology and show them what you were doing with the money. For us, we were fortunate. We started at the same year as Google Earth, and Google had given us this free place to put every single water project we would ever fund. We said, great, not only will we use 100%, we will prove every project. If we have 10,000 wells, there are 10,000 photos and GPS, and anyone in this room with a $100 Garmin device could go and visit them all. Third thing was I wanted to build a beautiful brand. There was no Apple in the nonprofit sector. There was no Nike. There weren't dazzling, imaginative, inspiring brands. My friends didn't know what the United Way did or the March of Dimes even did, let alone were moved by their brands. Nick Kristof had written in the New York Times that people were out there peddling toothpaste with more sophistication than all of these life-saving causes. I thought, this is so true. It's so broken. And you don't need a lot of money to build a brand. You need good taste. You need to hire good designers. You need to really care about the way things look and the way that you present your stories into the world. The most important thing in the business model was what we would not do, which was we would not send Westerners to Africa and to India and to Asia to dig wells. We would go and find and identify the amazing local organizations in these countries, and we would grow them. We would buy them drilling rigs and trucks. We would help them hire more hydrologists and take more office space. We would increase the local capacity and not jump out of our context. We would raise awareness. We would tell the stories of these organizations. So 8 years ago, it started with my birthday party. Nightclub promoters always can throw a good birthday party. It's turning 31, and I got 700 people to turn up in a club, and I gave them open bar, but I charged them 20 bucks at the door. And this time, instead of pocketing the $15,000, we took it all, every penny, immediately to a refugee camp in northern Uganda, and we did our first few projects. And then we sent the photos and the GPS back to those 700 people that attended the party. Let me tell you, some of my friends didn't remember attending the party, thought that it was amazing they had, and they had apparently been generous. In all seriousness, people were blown away that we bothered to tell them where $20 went, and they could see proof. And they even saw a video, and we said, let's just keep closing the loop. Let's keep trying to restore faith and tell people what we have done to steward their money, and maybe they'll continue to give, and we can continue to solve this problem. We built a social-first organization. We said, direct mail, I don't know, nobody I knew, your kids, they're not responding to these big paper appeals where we buy, our mailing addresses are bought and asking us for checks. This is going to happen on social media in the future. And we were the first charity to get 1 million followers on Twitter. We were the first charity in the world just to use Instagram on Morning One. And we looked for creative ways to build community and celebrate our different supporters in countries around the world. 2 important groups I'll talk about that have been really instrumental to our success over the last 8 years. The first is the Grassroots Support. We built a fundraising platform called My Charity Water where people could bring the best of themselves to this issue and know that 100% would go, and they and their friends could see their impact. And one of the biggest ideas was asking people to donate their birthday. So on my 32nd birthday, I was like, I do not want to throw another club, too much work, club party. But what if I donated my birthday? I have everything I need. I don't need a tie or a wallet. I don't need an Amazon gift card. What if I asked everyone I knew to donate $32 for my 32nd birthday? Everyone I knew had $32. They would have spent that on taxi and tip just coming to the party. And I promised my friends I would drill a well via satellite live from Africa to connect them if I reached my goal. To my surprise, I raised $59,000, almost all of it $32 at a time. I'm like, this is a big idea. Everybody has a birthday. Nobody needs more crap. People don't even have clean water. We can give up our birthdays, involve our friends and family, and help people get clean water. So this 7-year-old kid in Texas, Austin, Texas, there you go, Austin, this is great. Everybody, every place is realized tonight. He lived in a rich neighborhood, I'm not gonna lie. But he starts knocking on doors asking for $7 donations. Raises $22,000. Okay? So this just started spreading. Awesome. People in entertainment, Tony Hawk gives up his birthday, raises a ton of money. Angela Ahrendts, before she left Burberry and went to Apple, sends out one email, is honored by her business community with $101,000 in donations. Jack Dorsey, who created Twitter and Square, gave up 3 birthdays, has raised $170,000. Will and Jada Smith gave up their birthdays, asked their fans to give up birthdays. Actually came with us to see the impact that they'd made in Ethiopia. That was all cool, but what was most exciting to us was not, celebrity CEOs or celebrity actors. It was Lories of the world. 6-year-old kids, 16-year-olds, 89-year-olds, like Nona Ween. And I love Nona's mission statement so much. She realizes that she has double the life expectancy in so many of these countries where we're working because of where she was born. And if she could make that possible for others through her birthday, it was a good idea to her. Some people are like, my birthday is 10 months from now, I need to get involved now. People started climbing mountains for charity water, trying to raise $1 a foot. We've had people jump out of planes. We've had people give up their wedding gifts. We have had couples not go on honeymoon and send the money they have saved to fund a water project and say, we want to start our marriage out with an act of generosity. It is more important to give a village clean water than for us to go to the Amalfi Coast in Italy. We've had people bike across America. We've had people make sail across the Atlantic. 4 or 5 people now have walked across the country in solidarity to the people walking every day against their will. Riley ate rice and beans for a month, raised $15,000. You parents will like this. Her mom sent us this photo. It's a little hard to see, but it's just basically little lines written down. We said, what's up with the photo? Her mom said, well, Riley saw on your website that 4,500 kids die every day, so she asked me for pen and a paper, and she started writing 4,500 lines down because she wanted to know how big that number was. She wanted to feel it. A couple weeks ago, I was in Vancouver. I met Maddie. Maddie did not run 1 lemonade stand. She ran 12, one of them in the rain. For her going out lemonade stand, she convinced a local band to play on her sidewalk. She sold $5,300 worth of lemonade, 6 years old. So this was the community that just started organically building, and we realized this was never our story. This was their story. We needed to be intentional about giving it away, about celebrating them, celebrating our supporters, their empathy, their compassion, their gifts, their creativity, and inviting more people into this amazing story. We began working creatively with companies. So at the other end of the spectrum, our first big one was a New York story. We were a year old. I marched into Saks Fifth Avenue and said, you guys have figured out how to sell women $5,000 handbags. That is incredible. We have some $5,000 water projects. We should totally be working together. So actually, I think it was crazy enough that it worked. They said, we love this idea. They wound up giving me the windows on Fifth Avenue for a week after Marmani took his windows down. They got their employees engaged. They got their vendors engaged. They got their customers engaged. They raised over $700,000 as a company through tens of thousands of small gifts. The employees at the Jackson, Mississippi call center, their CEO told me, on minimum wage, were selling their own jewelry to get one water project funded in the name of their collective. Macallan came to us shortly after. Maybe there's some nice whiskey drinkers here. Well, they said, look, it rains all the time in Scotland, and there's a lot of water in the making of whiskey. How can we help? We're like, we have no idea where this is going. So their creative team comes back, and they said, we found it. We have a 64-year-old Macallan. It's the oldest that we've ever made. What if we took it on a world tour? And if you wanted to taste it for 10 centiliters or 1 dram, you had to drop $5,000. So we're like, you people are crazy. Who is ever going to pay you $5,000 to taste your old whiskey? Single bottle, $605,000. One guy paid 62 grand in Taipei just to taste it. Broke the Guinness World Record 4 times over. Caterpillar Foundation has been an amazing sponsor, funding over $6 million of water projects, helping over 200,000 people on a march to 1 million people served as a company. We've tried to be creative with that. We said, hey, let's put some of that money to work. We did a giant water walk at our gala. And we said, you know, hold off $1 million and we'll try to get 1,000 people to walk carrying these heavy jerry cans that unlocks those gifts. Trying just to find ways to creatively engage people and to work differently with brands and with companies. One of my favorites is a recent story with 100 dental offices. And they all got involved, and they started talking, you know, I guess you're a captive audience. Someone's drilling your teeth, and they started talking about charity water. And these dental offices raised over $2 million through tiny, tiny, tiny donations. And this movement just really began. So what one of the last cool partnerships we did was a branding with American Express, who was really excited about saying, you know, being a card holder is not about just the black card. It's not about, you know, pass the Grey Poupon and the Bugatti. You know, it's about a different kind of story, living your life with purpose, living your life with generosity. And they wound up putting our story on their homepage for a couple months. They wound up taking ads out in Food and Wine and Wine Spectator and Departures and just telling the charity water story to their amazing card members. What we began to focus on as a value was radical transparency on the stewardship of these tens of millions of dollars that they were raising. We began to use data to show impact, right? We knew where every single dollar was because we didn't touch it. Money was not fungible in the organization. So we tracked every single dollar and created online products where even if, you know, your 6-year-old gave $6, they could see the photos in the GPS where that wound up. We began to fund drilling rigs to help our partners go faster. And we mounted GPS units to the drilling rigs so people could track them in real time. We gave our rigs Twitter accounts so they tweet as they drill. Recently, we've been working with Google. Google awarded us a $5 million grant to further this transparency, which was the largest check they had written as a company to a nonprofit. And we began working on remote sensors that we could drop into these villages to actually know that water was continuing to flow over time. Maybe some of you are sitting there saying, oh, that's great. They build these wells. They know where they are. But what about 5 years from now? We wanted to solve that problem, too. At the same time, we began training local workforces of mechanics. Think of like a Geek Squad or Apple Care on wheels who could go and respond to that data. After 2 years and 20 different labs working on this, we have a remote sensor for about $100 that is now working. We're about to drop 4,000 into the field. And it's an amazing thing to sit in New York on my smartphone and see how many gallons, how many liters of clean water women are taking in a rural village in Ethiopia funded by a friend or a collection of generous people. All that has worked, and some of the ways that we have approached this differently have really propelled what's uncharacteristic in nonprofit growth. We averaged in our first 5 years, we averaged 90% year-over-year growth. Nonprofit giving over that cumulative 5 years was net negative. Our friends were laying people off from their charities. We've now raised over $170 million. This is not how we keep score. How we keep score is the amount of people we're able to help, the countries where we work. Right now, over 1,500 people are employed today on charity water projects in countries around the world. And we've been to help over 5 million people get clean water. It's another big number. It's really hard to get your hand, like, is this even any sort of impact? So last year, I was breaking it down for our staff, and we had done our first million-person year. I said, guys, that is an average of 2,700 people a day. Every day when you came to work, 2,700 people got clean water, 1 every 30 seconds. This is your return on equity. There is no stock when you work at Charity Water. We will never be acquired. We're never going to ring the bell. They have transferred their equity to some of the poorest people in the world, many who can never thank them. But when they go to bed tonight, 900 people will get clean water, thanks to their work, thanks to the work of our partners around the world, thanks to the generosity of our supporters. And this is what makes us get up. 5 million people, it's a lot. It makes a difference to those 5 million lives. 750 million, huge, huge problem. So I'm grateful to Tim for just giving me the opportunity to share the story with you and invite some of you guys into it. If you are sitting there saying, how can we help? A couple different ways. There are 100 people, in case you're curious, that actually pay for the entire staff and the overhead, making it possible for 700,000 donors to give in a pure way. Some of it are visionary business leaders. Some of them are entrepreneurs that make that possible. Some of you guys could partner with us creatively. There are so many amazing companies, so many responsible companies. You know, the world's most ethical companies. The world's most ethical companies are also, I believe, some of the most compassionate ones. So maybe there are creative ways that you guys would engage your employees or your vendors or work with us. Every single person in this room could donate their next birthday. The amazing thing about this is the average person, and I realize I am absolutely not talking to average people here, but the average person raises $1,000 with their birthday and involves 15 of their friends. So just imagine if this room just took that one idea and said, my next birthday, yeah, I'll tell some people about clean water. We would raise $500,000, change 15,000 lives just through a half-hour talk at the end of an evening. I've done 7 birthdays. It is amazing to be able to see it, to go into communities like this one in Niger where Hamadou is drinking the nastiest water you have ever seen in your life, where his mom is terrified to give it to him but has no option. And then to see our money, to see our generosity turn into local laborers who bring in drilling rigs, who serve their own people and lead their own communities forward, and to go back and see kids drinking clean water. It's one of the most amazing things. If you guys have any interest, I'm going to put up my email. It's pretty easy. It's scott@charitywater.org. Feel free to send me ideas. Feel free to engage us in any way. I'll end with my favorite quote. It came around the turn of like AD 20 or something by a Jewish rabbi named Hillel. And he said basically, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? And I think about that every single day. Thank you, guys.
So I guess maybe I could ask Ray Day or Paul Gennaro or some of the other world-class communicators in the world, how do you follow that? So you follow it by saying, Scott, thank you. Appreciate it. So as tonight draws to an end, I've got so many great feelings, and I continued to feel as I started this, I've got the coolest job in the world. Alex, our founder, thanks for that. It's pretty good. I appreciate it. Appreciate all you started and your thoughts. More than anything, I appreciate everything that you did. You know, by the way, I can tell you, I don't know where I found out about Scott's work and Charity Water, but my kids and I did that birthday thing, and it was pretty neat. So not too much of an overt pitch, but think about it. It's pretty neat. And I'm sure, Scott, you'll probably hear from others, and this was not a fundraising experience. This was just something to say it's such an honor to be associated with leaders like you guys. I started out talking about there's not one global rule of law, but there are companies around the world who do business in the right way and have a huge impact as a community. So with that, I will say good night, thank you, and congratulations.